laugh came first. Loud, sharp. It sliced through the room like broken glass. Before anyone could stop it, before anyone could pretend they didn't hear it, the sound hung in the air, ugly and proud, echoing off the glass walls of the boardroom. Every head turned at once. The billionaire stood at the center of the room, hand still half raised from a dramatic gesture, mouth curved in a smile that wasn't kind. And standing just a few feet away, frozen mid-motion, was the black janitor with a mop in his hands. The boardroom was supposed to be perfect that morning. Sunlight poured through floor-to-ceiling windows, bouncing off polished marble floors, and a table so long it looked like it could host a kingdom. This was the crown jewel of the building. The place where deals were sealed, futures decided, legacies carved into paper and ink. Executives had filled the room moments earlier, expensive suits brushing past one another, voices low and confident, whispering about stock prices, mergers, power. A camera crew followed closely, capturing every angle, every smile, every word. This was a tour meant to impress, a celebration of success. The billionaire had entered like he owned the air itself. His shoes clicked against the marble with purpose. His shoulders were back. His voice filled the room easily, practiced and smooth. He spoke of growth, of vision, of how hard work built empires. People nodded as he talked. Some took notes. Others simply watched, hopping to learn how confidence like that was worn so easily. And then he saw the janitor. The man wasn't doing anything wrong. He was simply mopping near the edge of the room, careful not to interrupt, moving slowly so he wouldn't draw attention. His uniform was clean but worn, sleeves rolled just enough to keep them dry. His face was calm, focused. He had cleaned rooms like this for years, learning how to become invisible when power walked by. But the billionaire noticed him anyway, or maybe he noticed the idea of him. The laugh escaped before anyone could stop it, a short burst at first, then louder. A few executives chuckled, unsure. The billionaire turned fully toward the janitor, eyes sparkling with something that looked like humor but felt like cruelty. He pointed at the floor with a casual flick of his hand. "Careful," he said, his voice carrying easily across the room. "That floor costs more than your yearly salary." The words landed heavy. They didn't bounce. They sank. Silence followed, thick and uncomfortable. The kind of silence that presses against your chest. Some people stared at the table. Others looked at their phones. One executive shifted his weight, forcing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. The camera crew hesitated, lenses still rolling, unsure whether to keep filming or look away. The janitor stopped moving. The mop rested against the floor, water slowly spreading in a small circle beneath it. His hands were steady. His head lowered just slightly, not in shame, but in restraint. He had learned long ago that reacting too fast could make things worse. He breathed once, then again. The billionaire smirked, enjoying the moment. He waved a hand as if brushing away dust. "You can step out," he said. "We're doing important work here." Like furniture being moved out of the way, the janitor nodded. No words, no protest. He simply shifted his grip on the mop and took a step back toward the wall. The room exhaled quietly, relieved the moment might pass. But it didn't. The air felt different now, heavy, charged, the kind of feeling that comes before thunder. The billionaire turned back to the executives and continued speaking, but something had changed. His words still came out smooth, still sounded confident, but they didn't land the same way. The shine was gone. His jokes fell flat. His points felt rehearsed instead of inspiring. The janitor stood near the wall, still as stone. From the outside, he looked small compared to the glass and steel around him, just another worker, just another background face. But inside him, memories stirred. Long nights, long days, promises made and broken, rooms like this one, men like this one. He had seen this world from angles most people never noticed. He knew its cracks, its secrets. No one else knew that, though. To the room, he was still just the janitor, the man with the mop, the man who had been laughed at. The billionaire kept talking. He spoke about leadership, about respect, about building people up. The irony went unnoticed by him, but not by everyone else. One young executive glanced at the janitor, guilt flickering across her face. She wanted to say something. She didn't. Fear held her in place. The cameras kept rolling. The janitor's eyes lifted just enough to watch the billionaire speak. His face remained calm, unreadable. Not angry, not broken, just quiet, too quiet. There was a strength in that stillness that didn't belong to someone defeated. It belonged to someone waiting. The billionaire finished his point and smiled, expecting applause. A few hands came together, slow and scattered. The sound echoed weakly in the large room. He nodded, satisfied enough and prepared to move on. Behind him, the janitor tightened his grip on the mop. No one noticed, not yet. The glass walls reflected the scene back at itself. Power at the center, silence at the edges, a man who believed he stood at the top of the world, and another man who knew exactly how fragile that world really was. The storm hadn't broken, not yet. But it was coming. The tour moved on, but the moment did not. It followed them out of the boardroom like a shadow that refused to lift. The billionaire led the group down the glass hallway, his voice rising again as if nothing had happened, as if laughter had not cut a man in half only minutes earlier. He spoke about profits and innovation, about numbers so large they stopped sounding real. He talked about legacy, about his name etched into buildings and history. People nodded. Cameras rolled. Shoes clicked in rhythm behind him, but every few steps, his eyes drifted back. The janitor was still there. He stood near the wall now, wiping fingerprints from a framed timeline that told the company's story in bold letters and proud photos. Founding year, first million, first billion, smiling faces, all white, all confident. The janitor moved slowly, carefully, like he respected the story more than the men who told it. His name badge hung crooked on his chest, edges frayed, letters faded from years of wear. Most people couldn't read it anymore. He had worked in this building longer than many of the executives walking past him now. He had watched young men arrive hungry and leave powerful. He had watched others fall just as fast. He had learned that power loved to pretend it was permanent. The billionaire noticed the badge. He noticed the mop cart. He noticed the way the janitor kept his eyes down. Something about it annoyed him. He stopped walking. "This," the billionaire said suddenly, turning toward the guests, "is what happens when you don't dream big." He pointed directly at the janitor. Not his job, not the mop, him. A few awkward laughs followed, soft, forced, the kind people make when they're scared not to. One man cleared his throat. A woman shifted her bag higher on her shoulder. The camera lens tightened, capturing the moment in sharp detail. The janitor's jaw tightened, just slightly, enough to show he felt it, but he didn't speak. He didn't look up. He kept wiping the glass even as the words pressed into his back. He had heard versions of them his whole life. Louder, meaner, said with less polish. He had learned long ago that silence was sometimes the only armor allowed. The billionaire smirked, pleased with himself, and continued walking. The tour followed, but the distance between them and the janitor felt wider now, like a line had been drawn. Halfway down the hall, the billionaire stopped again. He turned, snapping his fingers without looking. "You," he said. "Coffee, black, no sugar, let's move." It wasn't a request. It was a command, a reminder of place. The camera crew caught it all. The janitor nodded once and pushed his cart toward the break area. His steps were steady, but his hands trembled as he reached for the cups. Not from fear, from memory. Old offices, old promises. A younger version of himself standing in rooms like this, holding folders instead of mops. He remembered being told to wait, to trust, to be patient. He remembered signatures that never came, doors that slowly closed. He poured the coffee carefully, making sure it was hot, the way the billionaire liked it. He placed the cup on a small tray and walked back, eyes forward, posture straight. As he approached, a young executive caught his eye. Her face flushed. She leaned closer as he passed. "I'm sorry," she whispered, so quietly it almost vanished. Fear flickered behind her eyes. She didn't say more, she couldn't. The janitor gave a small nod. Not forgiveness, understanding. The billionaire took the cup without thanks. He sipped, grimaced, then sneered. "About time," he said, loud enough for others to hear. He handed the cup back as if it were suddenly beneath him and launched back into his speech, talking over the janitor as if he weren't standing there at all. They returned to the boardroom. The light looked colder now. The glass felt sharper. The billionaire took his place at the head of the table again, straightening his jacket, lifting his chin. He spoke about vision, about how this company rewarded ambition, about how anyone could rise if they worked hard enough. He smiled at the cameras. He expected applause. The janitor stood by the door. He hadn't left. His cart rested beside him. The mop leaned against the wall. His hands were still now. Calm, grounded. He watched the room, the faces, the way people avoided his eyes. He felt the weight of years pressing against his chest. Not anger, not sadness, something deeper, something settled. The billionaire finished his speech and spread his arms slightly, waiting. The room hesitated. A few claps began, slow and uncertain. The sound felt hollow. The billionaire turned toward the door and snapped his fingers again. "You can go now," he said, not bothering to look. "We're done." The janitor didn't move. The silence stretched, long, heavy, the kind that makes people uncomfortable in their seats. The billionaire frowned and finally looked up. The janitor took one step forward, then another. His voice, when it came, was low and steady. No anger, no fear, just truth waiting to be heard. "Sir," he said, every eye in the room snapping toward him, "before I go, there's something you should know." The room held its breath. The room went still the moment the janitor spoke. Not quiet, still, like time had been told to stop moving. Chairs no longer shifted. Breath was held without permission. Even the hum of the building seemed to fade. The camera crew leaned in without thinking, instincts taking over, lenses tightening as if they could feel something breaking open. At the head of the table, the billionaire frowned, irritation flashing across his face like a reflex. He wasn't used to being interrupted. Not here. Not by someone like this. "Make it quick," he said, his voice sharp, thin patience stretched tight. He leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms, already prepared to dismiss whatever came next. The janitor didn't flinch. He didn't rush either. He reached slowly into the pocket of his worn uniform, fingers brushing against fabric that had thinned over years of washing and work. The motion was calm, deliberate. From the pocket, he pulled out a folder, old, creased. The edges were soft from time and handling. It didn't belong in a room like this. That alone made people uneasy. He stepped forward and placed the folder on the table. The sound was quiet, a soft tap, but it echoed louder than the billionaire's laugh had earlier. The janitor opened it. Inside were documents, not random papers, organized, careful, blueprints printed on yellowing sheets, technical drawings marked with notes in neat handwriting, patent filings, dates stamped decades ago. The janitor let the folder lie open, then lifted his eyes and looked around the room, not at the cameras, not at the executives. He looked at the walls, the glass, the company logo etched everywhere like a crown. Then he looked back at the billionaire. 20 years ago, he said, his voice steady, grounded, I designed the core system this company runs on. The words landed like a dropped plate. Murmurs spread instantly, low voices, sharp breaths. Someone whispered, "What?" Another shook their head slowly, like their brain refused to accept what it heard. The billionaire laughed, a short burst meant to cut the moment down to size. It came out wrong, too loud, too fast. "That's funny," he said, waving a hand. "Really funny." But then his eyes fell to the page. He leaned forward despite himself. The laughter stopped. There at the bottom of the document was a signature, bold, familiar, his father's name. Color drained from the billionaire's face so fast it looked like someone had pulled a plug. His mouth opened slightly, then closed. He reached out, snatching the folder closer, flipping pages with sudden urgency. More signatures, more dates, legal language, technical terms he had grown up hearing at dinner tables and board meetings. This wasn't a joke. This wasn't a trick. The janitor kept speaking. He told them about being hired as a consultant when the company was still young, when the building didn't have glass walls and marble floors, when the billionaire's father was hungry, not powerful. He talked about long nights spent drafting designs, solving problems no one else could. He talked about meetings where people nodded and praised his mind, where promises were made with firm handshakes and confident smiles. He talked about being told partnership would come later, after launch, after profits, after things settled. They never did. When the system succeeded, when money flooded in, the calls slowed. Emails stopped. His access was quietly cut. Lawyers appeared where partners were supposed to be. Lawsuits were buried under layers of money and delay. Credit was reassigned. His name vanished from records like it had never been there at all. The janitor's voice didn't shake as he spoke. It didn't rise. It stayed even, controlled, like someone who had already cried all the tears years ago. "My life derailed," he said simply. Not overnight, slowly, bills piled up, doors closed, calls stopped getting returned. He paused, letting that sink in. "I took this job," he continued, gesturing around the room to stay close, to survive, to watch. The room felt smaller now. The executives who once looked down at him avoided his eyes. A few stared openly at the documents, seeing the company's success through a new, ugly lens. One man swallowed hard. A woman pressed her hand to her mouth. The billionaire sat frozen. He stared at the papers, then at the janitor, then back at the papers again, like the order might change the truth. His father's shadow loomed over him, heavy and unavoidable. Stories he had heard growing up twisted into something darker. Pride curdled into shame. The janitor closed the folder gently. "I'm not here for revenge," he said. "I'm not here for your money." That surprised people. They leaned in again. "I just wanted the truth acknowledged," he said. "That's all." He looked down at his uniform. At the faded badge no one could read anymore. "I mopped these floors," he said quietly, "because dignity doesn't come from titles." Something broke then. A tear slid down the face of the young executive who had apologized earlier. She didn't bother to wipe it away. Another man stared at the table, jaw clenched, eyes red. The cameras kept rolling, capturing faces that had never expected to be part of a moment like this. The billionaire tried to speak. No sound came out. His mouth opened again, closed. He cleared his throat, but the words still wouldn't come. The power he carried so easily before was gone, stripped away in front of everyone. The room that had once echoed with mockery now held only shame and disbelief. No one laughed. No one clapped. The janitor stood there, calm as ever, waiting, not demanding, not pleading, just present. And in that silence, everyone felt it. The balance had shifted. But what would happen next? No one yet knew. The silence after the truth felt endless. It pressed down on the room until even the billionaire seemed smaller in his chair. Then slowly he stood, not with confidence, not with control. He stood like a man carrying weight he had avoided his whole life. His hand brushed the edge of the table to steady himself. When he tried to speak, nothing came out at first. He swallowed. His voice cracked when it finally arrived, thin and human in a room that had always rewarded power. "I was wrong," he said. The words surprised everyone, including himself. He looked at the janitor, really looked at him for the first time, not as a role, not as a uniform, but as a man. "I'm sorry," he continued. His eyes moved around the room, meeting faces he usually spoke over. "I'm sorry to all of you, and to the cameras." He paused, breath uneven. "And to myself." No one interrupted. No one moved. He spoke about his father, about stories he had chosen not to question, about success built so high it made it easy to ignore what was underneath. He admitted that the company's rise carried shadows he had never bothered to step into. His voice broke again when he said the janitor's name, reading it carefully from the faded badge like it mattered, because now it did. "I can't undo what was taken," he said, "but I can do what should have been done." He promised restitution, public credit, legal acknowledgement of the work that built the company's foundation. He promised transparency, change. Then, after a long pause, he added something that felt heavier than money. "A seat at the table," he said, "if you want it." Every eye turned to the janitor. The room waited for a reaction. Some expected anger, others expected triumph. The janitor didn't give them either. He listened. He studied the billionaire's face, not for words, but for truth behind them. Then he nodded once. Small, controlled. Forgiveness wasn't loud. It didn't clap or cheer. It settled quietly like dust after a storm. Earned, not demanded. The boardroom tour ended without applause. No one posed for photos. The cameras shut off slowly, unsure how to capture what had just happened. People filed out in silence, carrying something heavier than shock. They carried truth. Outside those glass walls, the story didn't stay quiet for long. News spread fast, clips leaked, headlines questioned legacies, stocks dipped as uncertainty rippled through the market, analysts argued, commentators shouted, but something unexpected happened. After the fall came steadiness. The company didn't collapse, it adjusted, policies changed, credit was restored. Quiet meetings replaced loud speeches. People listened more, watched more, chose words carefully. Faces changed. So did the billionaire. He stopped speaking first in meetings. He started asking questions. He walked the halls slower. He noticed people he had once passed without seeing. He learned that leadership wasn't about being heard the loudest. It was about standing still long enough to hear others. Weeks later, the building felt different. The janitor no longer wore a badge. He wore a suit now, tailored but simple. When he walked through the same glass doors, heads turned, not out of fear, out of respect. Some people smiled. Some nodded. Some looked away, still learning how to face him. He took his place at the table without ceremony, without pride, without bitterness. He spoke when it mattered. He listened more than he talked. And sometimes, when meetings ran long and voices rose, his eyes would drift to the corners of the room, to the floors that once reflected his mop strokes. He never forgot them. On his first day addressing the company, he didn't mention revenge. He didn't mention humiliation. He didn't even mention his title. Greatness doesn't announce itself, he said calmly. It waits. The room leaned in. It waits in quiet work, in overlooked hands, in people you pass every day without seeing. He paused, letting the words land. I learned that dignity isn't given by a chair or a nameplate. It comes from knowing who you are, even when the world refuses to. The billionaire stood beside him, listening, not leading, learning. The glass walls still stood tall, but they reflected something new now. Not just power, accountability. The story didn't end with celebration. It ended with understanding. Because power without humility is hollow, and dignity can live in the most overlooked places, in a mop, in silence, in patience. And in the end, the true measure of a person isn't who they stand above, but who they choose to see.